Hello and welcome to the Classic Car Weekly podcast, the sibling podcast to the popular weekly title. I'm this week's host, Jesse Billington, and I'm joined again by our editor, David Simister.
Good afternoon.
And by our content editor, James Peen.
Hello.
How are we, gents? And as we all usually kick off, how are the classics? Any sort of advances on that front, or are they all tucked up for winter?
Mine's still both tucked up for winter at the moment. The Toyota, I think its next outing is probably going to be big outing sort of show-wise, probably be Boxing Day for the Lakeland Motor Museum's Classic Drive-In Day. So that'll be my next thing to do. So that'll be that. But I know I was a big trip out to Yorkshire yesterday to see the Matthewsons, and but that was very much I was given a brand new Vauxhall Corsa for that job, and it was very boring. It was too. So I wish I had a classic to go to that.
Perfect. And James, any advance on your front?
No, mine aren't tucked up for winter. Kind of like Scrooge left the orphans out in the cold. It's one of those things that down in Somerset, it's either been perishing cold or chucking it down with rain. So there's been no activity other than pumping up a tyre, which I've repeated flat tyre on the Beetle. So I think that's a bit of a protest of not being used. So hopefully get out over Christmas and New Year, but I'm not going to promise anything.
Fair enough. It's about the same on the MG front at the moment as well. It's relatively quiet. I'd hoped to take it out last weekend to get to an event, but timings just didn't fall in my favour for that one, so passed up on that one. But it's still out and about, and hopefully going to head out and about this later this week, or hopefully next week as well, for a few bits and pieces, plus maybe a few bits over the Christmas period as well. But we'll see how that pans out. I won't hang anything on it. But we'll dive into this week's issue. And we'll kick off actually somewhere deep in the issue with the buying and selling opener. And James, this is sort of an update from the markets and auctioneers, and there's sort of good news, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke to a number of classic specialists, auctioneers and what have you, and they all kind of agreed that confidence has returned to the market, and that's a trend that is set to continue into 2026. And a lot of positives as well from the people we spoke to about shows in general, and a bit of a feel-good factor has returned to the scene, possibly down to influx of younger visitor shows and younger demographic buying cars. But basically, they said that the year started off well and it's got stronger and stronger, and that's hopefully something that's going to continue.
Sort of when it comes to sort of younger people buying cars or sort of cheaper cars coming through, what seems to be sort of the overall trend that's really driving this, or is it just sort of a number of factors coalescing?
It seems to be like, as it always is, like demographics change, don't they? So people buy the cars that they remember. So as the demographic becomes a little bit younger than, dare I say, it traditionally seems to be, people tend to moving away from the sort of 60s and 70s stuff, more into the 80s, 90s, the noughties cars. Particularly unexceptional cars. That seems to be quite a trend. Stuff for festival unexceptional that I suppose myself and David probably would just view as old cars that have sort of on the cusp of being cool just for being rare. And obviously still the hot hatch stuff and the M series Beamers and things like that. So yeah, that sort of stuff really.
And sort of we're waiting for market prices to really sort of catch up with this shift in sort of demand and appreciation. And as a result, there's sort of this boom in sort of cars arriving on the classic scene that are affordably priced and therefore driving these sales, it seems. I don't know if, David, you've heard anything else sort of similar down the news line, or sort of what your view is from sort of an editor's position.
Yeah, I mean, I was at, as was mentioned before, I was at the Matthewsons yesterday. They were holding their Christmas classic car sale, and it was really interesting actually, because again, not only did you get the chance to see at the Stars of Bangs and Cash wearing Silly Father Christmas hats, but there were also they had 108 cars going under the hammer, and actually, I think one of the things that I picked from, there was a real buzz about the sale, and certainly this seemed to be reflective of other sales that we've seen over the last few months as well, that there's a real appetite at the moment for sort of people to go out and have fun with classic cars, and that is being driven by the fact that these cars are cheaper than they were a couple of years ago. So I mean, there were a couple of really good deals. I mean, I was very tempted by there was a 1980 MGB GT in Vermilion. It looked absolutely corking, and it was really nice, eye-catching car. It went on to hammer for £3,300, and it was a really nice example. Modern classics, there was a Ford Puma as well, 1.7, the one you want. And crucially, it didn't have crusty rear arches as well, so it was much better than the one that we used to have on CCW. And that actually really went past its estimate, went for 5.5 grand, which actually was a really strong result for one of those. But actually, when you think about it, it's a really peppy, fun little car, and it just kind of shows you just what's out there. If you've got 5-6 grand to spend, actually there's a lot of stuff out there at the moment. So regardless of whether you're looking for trad classics or something a bit more modern, there's another one. There was a Peugeot 306 GTI 6 which went for just over 5k, which again it was a really nice example, and it just kind of shows you that there's so much stuff out there. And I think that overall shift, we've seen this throughout results over the past year. Generally speaking, prices are softer than they were probably 2 or 3 years ago as we were coming out of the pandemic. And what that means is that more people have been able to get out there and actually get these cars. They are the cheapest they've been for years. And what we're seeing in different auction houses is enthusiasts are actually coming in now and getting these cars, which is great for our hobby. It means people are actually engaging with what we're doing, and going out and just having fun, which I think especially in these troubled times, I think that's a good thing, that people are actually getting out there and and engage, indulging themselves in a hobby and having fun, which is really good to see.
I mean, that echoes one of the sentiments that Matthew Priddy at Historic said to me as well, that from confidence point of view, it's driven by more realistic prices towards the end of the year, and people not so much buying for investment, but as cars they want to enjoy. I mean, that's only going to be a good thing, isn't it, for everybody? If you're trying to buy something just to enjoy it and the prices are coming down, that's only good news for classic owners, unless you're selling, of course.
Yeah, you're feeling sort of less cagey about using something you bought for a reasonable price. You're sort of more open to enjoy it, drive it, and sort of get out and do it, especially as we're seeing a younger generation sort of coming into owning cars, and a younger generation of cars arriving that are more tenable, more usable. It's sort of six one half does the other that really fuels both parts of that argument, really sort of encouraging people to get out and use it. When it came to sort of the buyers at the auction yesterday, David, was there sort of a different demographic to it, or are we still seeing sort of similar people turning up to sort of auctions in person, or was there an online option for this, or was it all just in the hall?
Yeah, there was quite a lot. I mean, with this particular auction, there was a live. Matthewson's tend to do most of their auctions online, so they had a limited number of people because it was quite a small venue, kind of invite only, in actually doing the bidding in the hall. But so they had quite a mixed band of enthusiasts sort of sticking their hand up. It was great. There was a guy who was actually in a full-on Santa outfit at the front who was doing bidding. So it was this bizarre spectacle of Father Christmas putting in bids for a Ford Zodiac, and so there was that. But apart from Father Christmas, it was a really nice, like, kind of quite more diverse crowd than I'm used to. But also, one of the things that really struck me was a lot of online activity as well. So you could see the bids flying in, and the thing that was noticeable actually was that again, we've seen this at auctions throughout this year, is that yes, prices are a little bit softer than they were, but they're still quite happy to pay for cars that are in the right condition and of the right kind of history behind them. So there was one that really stood out for me. There was a 1960 Ford Zodiac Mark II, and that was absolutely sailed past its estimate. Went for 16.5 grand on the hammer, so it'll be sort of over 17 when you add in premium. And there was I think probably the absolute star of the sale. It was absolutely gorgeous Mark I Granada gear, and that went for £33,000, which was an absolutely thumping result. So it just shows you that there are, if you have a car that has that really, it's been really doted on, it has all the history from you, those are the cars that are actually, even in today's kind of softer market, they're still doing really well, and that's being driven because the people out there doing the buying, they're not so much investors now, they are enthusiasts, and they want the best and they're happy to pay for it.
That sort of overarching buying to speculate sort of thing has sort of released the market to be a bit more dynamic, and obviously we'll still get the star cars, like you said, selling for big money, but yeah, interesting to try and think that obviously the elves don't have the metal beating skills, so Santa had to go out and buy a Zodiac instead of have one made up in the workshop. But yeah, it's an interesting time. We've got a lot of interesting sort of buying related stories throughout this week's issue. The lead story on sort of the opening part of the news pages is a really interesting Ford Popular that's come to market as well. And do we think we're going to see this sort of interesting shift as sort of 40s and 50s cars re-emerge to the market, but after a new audience?
Possibly. I mean, certainly the vibe I was getting yesterday again is that it's all about conditioning. I think the conversation I was having yesterday is that pre-war cars. I mean, we know that we've seen, those have been very cheap buys for a long time, and I think again. And we're seeing that increasingly now with sort of 50s and early 60s cars, as well. That when they start falling beyond living memory, that's when the nostalgia that drives a lot of these buys suddenly starts to it starts to fizzle out gradually. So that means that I think obviously people are buying them on condition and value. So I think things like I'd be very interested to see what that Ford Pop that's in this week's issue goes for, because it has got something really interesting behind it. But for most people here in the market for something like a Standard 8 or a Ford Pop or something along those lines, obviously they're not selling for as much as they once did, because there just isn't the nostalgia for them as much.
I mean, I think it's a cyclical thing again. It's like in terms of you always look for something a little bit different. If you've been doing something for quite a while and that gets a little bit stale, you look around. So I think maybe with the more modern classics, I think people are bored of modern cars and they want something that's a bit easy to get in and drive that feels different to what they've got. And for me as well, a lot of my friends who've grown up with sort of 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s classics, you're also looking around and thinking, well, actually, a pre-war car is quite interesting, and they're affordable and they're easy to work on. So I think your focus shifts after a while, doesn't it? So I think they'll come back, but who knows how much.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of it is around people seeing these cars being really affordable because they offer so much for the money, and that's why you're seeing the high sale rates for them and the interest, because the prices they are at the moment. Well, why wouldn't you have fun with an Austin 7 or something like that?
I know that's something the VSCC is sort of leaning into at the HGVA conference back in October, I think it was. They were talking about sort of encouraging this new generation in, and at the moment, while prices are sort of starting to slide for certainly pre-war cars and sort of getting into the vintage sort of era as well, there's this affordability that's creeping in, and a wave of sort of classic fans that are more willing to give it a go because it's at a more reasonable point in the budget. You can have a go with an Austin 7 if it doesn't fit for you, if you don't really enjoy it. You can put it back on the market again with no great loss. And I think this sort of affordability is making not necessarily long-term ownership sort of a prospect, but certainly sort of people giving it a go, keeping cars out there and experiencing them. And I think that's just as important if it's short-term ownership as it is for sort of long-term ownership. And we get sort of like our keepers where people have these cars for sort of decades upon decades. Nothing wrong with that. But for a younger generation that doesn't have that initial sort of nostalgia for them, they just want to try lots of different cars. And not to say that they start wheeler dealing, but you sort of just give everything a go and see how you find it. I think these more affordable prices open up this sort of interesting opportunity.
Yeah, and that kind of level, it's when you compare that to kind of other things you could do with that kind of, I don't know, 4 or 5 grand, I mean the alternatives are in terms of your disposable income. You take the family away 2 weeks in Florida, in which case you come back with some pictures and a suntan, but that's it, it's gone after that, or you could have a football season ticket, in which case you've got your memories of it after at the end of it, but that's it. Or if you're smoking, you get some lung cancer at the end of it, but there's no material asset at the end of it. With classic cars, you can spend the same sort of money on something really fun and enjoyable, like an Anglia or a Herald or a Dolomite or something like that. There's loads of different cars out there, and there's loads of support for them. And at the end of the year, you've still got your car and you can still sell it, and they're not depreciating either. So if you buy a car for 4 or 5 grand, as long as you look after it, it's still going to be worth about 4 or 5 grand in a year or so's time.
Yeah. Do you think you could put that in writing for my wife? Because I think she'd rather have 2 weeks in Corfu than me buy another old banger for the driveway.
Yeah, I feel my girlfriend might argue for the Corfu trip as well, but I'd be down for another
You
sort of
could go to
silly old car.
Corfu in your Triumph Herald. There you go. That's the solution.
It's a long old drive, but
It
could be
is,
quite
yeah.
nice.
But the fun you'd have on the way, you still have a Triumph Herald at the end of it.
I think it'd be breaking down before it even gets to Albania for the ferry that'd be the real issue. Anyway, we'll stick with sort of the buying theme, but up completely at the opposite end of the price spectra and a little more sort of fanciful, because of course there was a recent auction at Bonhams that was packed full of movie cars that have emerged from a museum in, I think it was France, I think I'm correct in saying.
Just outside Paris.
Yes, and obviously Christmas is on the horizon. Everyone's got wish lists coming together. You guys, which of the cars that come from this sale sort of would top your wish list? We'll do a little bit of fanciful thinking.
I think for me, the one of them, I will preface this with it's not the actual car; it's a replica, that appeared in this particular museum. But it was a replica of the Ferrari Daytona Spider that appeared in Miami Vice. It's I'd taken along to shows. I don't care that it's not the real deal, but you could drive around in that at night, with in the air tonight blasting out, and it looks like a Ferrari. It looks cool, and it sold for 29,000 euros, which is about £25,000 in Queen's English, and that's probably the cheapest way you're ever going to get. The cheapest way you're going to get to sort of a pucker car that was an 80s hit, and to the untrained eye will still look like a Ferrari Daytona Spider as well.
Am I right in thinking that they didn't actually have a Daytona Spider for the
No,
first series of it
no,
anyway? So it's
well,
more true to form.
It was a Corvette underneath, which Ferrari got very, very cross about, and then that was the story behind how Ferrari wanted that car destroyed, and then they gave them the white Testarossa instead, which is how that car came about.
So if anything, having a replica Ferrari built on a Corvette is very sort of true to the sort of originality of the production of the series.
It's a replica of a replica that appeared in the TV show. It's gloriously inauthentic.
It's brilliantly inauthentic and authentic in it at the same time. I do quite like that, and I think for smoking around in that'll look pretty cool indeed. James, which way are you going? And
I'm going to go the obvious route. I'm going to go for the Herbie replica. So, having just written like the top 10 Beetles feature as well, and I'll ask my opinion on what is the best Volkswagen Beetle to go for. 62, 63 ragtop is the ultimate. The best mix of looks and practicality with a full fabric sunroof as well. And who doesn't love Herbie?
that's a fair answer. And I mean, we'll circle back around to the Beetle because I've got a challenge for you in a minute. That leaves me with a really tricky thing because you've all very quickly sort of picked your ones, and I picked a couple of options that I like the look of. I think I'm gonna have to go for something that I think a lot of people would think falls a long way outside my usual wheelhouse, and it's the 1999 Peugeot 406 from Taxi, because at school in French lessons it was usually sort of like the end of term treat that the French teacher would just chuck on either Taxi or Taxi 2, and it was great because all in French with English subtitles. It was sort of like enforced learning, but there's something just so cool about that sort of modified sort of Taxi Peugeot that always sits within my mind as sort of a bit of a soft spot. So for me the V6 406 is going to take the win for me, I think. And a rather reasonable final price of 95,000 euros for a Peugeot 406.
That must be the most that's ever been paid for a Peugeot 406 ever.
I think it's a fair amount paid for it. I think also this was the one sort of driven during filming by Jean Ragnotti as well, who famous for driving the Renault 5 turbos across rally stages and all sorts. And it's signed by Jean as well as Sami Nasseri, who was the actor for the sort of lead character throughout the film as well. So it's it just ticks every box for me for sort of very weird noughties nostalgia, and back in my school days watching this on the projector at school.
Also, I've never seen it, but there's that Renault Fuego GTL in the same sale as well, which is quite cool. And I remember going to the dealership with my dad to look at Renault Fuegos a long time, thinking how cool they were. When was the last time you saw a Fuego anywhere?
They're not really kicking around a lot. Is that the one from
only at car shows? I think. It's been a long time since I've seen a Renault Fuego in the wild.
They're not a popular car out on the scene. I mean, I was torn between a couple of other cars. I think, obviously, with my love for sort of American muscle, the Dukes of Hazzard film, General Lee was a big appeal, and I did like that film. It was a bit silly, but I do like a Charger, and again, one in full sort of bright orange with O1 on the doors has to be a favorite. But I was disappointed to find that the Chevy Monte Carlo from Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift doesn't have an engine in it, which does leave it open to chucking a 454 in it. But yeah, I love that car in the sequence that it was used in the film, and think that it was one of the more interesting builds. And yeah, I like the rat rod look of it, even if it is a bit more beaten up now post filming. But yeah, it's an interesting collection of cars they've got through for that sale. It looks like someone had a good deal with the Fast and Furious franchise to just buy cars when they're finished with production, because it is stacked full of stuff from that series, which is great if you like your Dodge Chargers, really, because there's a couple of Vin Diesel's motors in there. But I said we're going to cycle back round to the Beetle, and we'll do that now, actually, because there's a brilliant feature in this week's issue, James, which takes a look at the Volkswagen Beetle, and we sort of tasked you with doing essentially a spotter's guide for them, and readers can enjoy that. But I wanted to sort of pin you down for your top 3 Volkswagen Beetle facts.
Top 3 Volkswagen Beetle facts. Well, the one everyone knows, 4 bolts the engine comes out, kind of. Yeah. Wasn't invented by Hitler. It was commissioned by Hitler. There's another one for you. And we got Hitler into our Christmas podcast, so that's always a good sign. And off the top of my head, they're the best cars ever made, and everyone should own one.
It feels more like an opinion than a fact, but it is a very interesting feature nonetheless. With
how many Beetles have you owned, James?
I think it's about 20.
That's an alarming amount.
Yeah. Mostly ruby red for some reason, 60s ones. Yeah, it's around that sort of mark. I'd have to sit down and write it down, but you know when you sort of come up with a car list in your head, and you always forget something. But yeah, I think it's around that sort of mark now, 20.
And have you owned all the types of Beetle that are in this week's feature?
I've never owned a 1303. Looks only a mother could love, but that's a very personal opinion. But I've owned, the oldest one I've owned is the 58, and I've gone all the way up to 73. So
Yeah,
I've owned
pretty
much something of everything. Yeah.
So yeah, so all sorts. But yeah, this is basically, if you're new to VW Beetles, then this is the issue to pick up, because James, a man who's owned many of them, will be able to guide you through the highs and lows of them, and which ones are the ones to go for.
It's proper anorak knowledge. There's no how to spot your model years when you're at a show.
Yeah, a great way to sort of sit down with sort of a pair of binoculars at a show and sort of start crossing them off as you go, like a sort of twitcher. I think it's a really interesting piece, and it sort of has a proper sort of joy and engagement with the model as well, that sort of is woven into it from sort of a passionate owner of at least 20 by your count. So it's a fun piece. Elsewhere in the issue, what was next on my to-do list? That was it. We've got Christmas events also slotted into this week's issue, and I think David, you mentioned at the top of the show you're heading off to the Lake District for the Lakeland Museum's sort of Boxing Day meet. Is there anything else that's sort of on your calendar for the festive season until sort of, say, early January?
I was going to go to the Lap of Lights, but unfortunately I'm double booked. But I know you're thinking about going to that, aren't you, Jesse?
Yes, heading along Friday next week, actually. Yes, yeah, because that's pretty much on my doorstep. So hopefully drag the MG out, drop the roof, and enjoy the full sort of 4D effects of Silverstone bedecked with plenty twinkling lights and laser displays.
Yeah, and I mean, I would very much think there are a couple of quite good New Year events on as well. I'm not sure which one we'll be going to. I know certainly the big ones. They've got Brooklands Museum. They've got Vintage Stone, which I know you're going to, Jesse, as well. So plenty, and again, we'll have more on that in next week's issue as well. So keep an eye out for that too.
Yeah, lots to look forward to. James, have you got anything that's sort of on the events list for you over the Christmas period, or are you staying sort of tucked in and wrapped up?
I would like to knock down a wall to enlarge my driveway, so that's possibly the extent of my car-based activities. So we'll see what we can get out and do, but I'm not planning to be too far from home. To be fair.
Fair enough. I think that is my very much advantage of being sort of on the edge of the Midlands. Is everything is pretty close to me when it comes to either things like Silverstone or Stoney or.
Have you measured the space you're going to be creating, James, in square feet or beetles?
You could get a double garage on there and still have space for 3 or 4 cars. So it's all worked out. It's just a case of need to sell the van, get the garage ordered, pop it on. That's the fun. Have somewhere nice. We've got a spare armchair to put in the garage.
That's what we should do. We should have Volkswagen Beetles. We should campaign for it to be introduced as a unit of measurements.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had 2 on there with the van so far, but I reckon you could get an easy sort of 4 or 5, maybe even 6 if you stacked them in the correct order.
So next time you sort of go on Rightmove and they sort of say it comes with a small parcel of land, 24 beetles in size, that's sort of the way it's going to be defined as a measurement.
Yes,
sort of like,
Yeah, none of which work.
Yeah,
excellent
7
units of measurements.
a garden 7 beetles by 6 beetles, and there we go. There we go. Perfect. I mean, we should do an official opening of James's garage with at least as many beetles packed into it as possible. Sort of like the inverse of how many people can you get in a beetle, how many beetles can you get in a garage instead. Just sort of
It used to be a measurement of money as well. If someone said, "Oh, this costs X amount," and I'd say, "Well, you could buy a van for that." To me, so it's like that's how I work things out. It's cars for money.
yeah. Someone says, "Oh, how much does your holiday cost?" "Oh, about 4.5 grand." And I go, "That's one MG midget." I'm like, I don't know if that was a wise investment on your half, but that's a personal choice. We're quickly getting sidetracked, but anyway, that gives us a nice point to sort of start to draw to a close this week's issue. If anyone else has anything further to add, I don't know.
No, I think that the main thing is obviously to employ everyone. Once you finish reading this week's packed issue, keep an eye out for our Christmas special, which is going to be out next Wednesday. Lots of things to look forward to. We've got a festive treat coming up, so that'll be on the shelves in the shops next week.
Yeah, 17th of December, and there is a lot to look forward to in that one. We've been putting in the hard graft to get that one set for a Christmas special. And elsewhere in this week's issue, the way we were heads to December in 1965 and commentary retail market, while Next Generation Diaries lifts the lid on Brad and his tasty 1982 Cortina. I did rather like the look of that one, and it makes for a very nice read indeed. Otherwise, gents, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon, and I believe we've still got a bit of production to get through on the Christmas issue, so I shall let you all crack on.